Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight, my guest is Tom Conwell. Before I bring him on, I have to thank CuriosityStream. They are the award-winning destination for documentary series and features covering every topic from space exploration to adventure. Satisfy your thirst for knowledge anytime and anywhere with CuriosityStream. Their subscriptions start at only $2.99 a month. Just click the link in the description to sign up today. And please subscribe to Forbidden Knowledge News on lbry.com. That is our official backup channel in case anything happens on YouTube. We're also available on all your popular podcast platforms. Unfortunately, we have been demonetized by our primary podcast provider. We are currently looking for a new provider, but looks like we are going to be out of luck until the new year. We haven't had any responses yet, nor have we had a response from our primary provider, who is withholding last month's revenue, and we are no longer making any money. So it looks like like I said, we're going to be out of luck until the beginning of the year, and it's going to be a very difficult couple of weeks. But we're going to continue to broadcast as much as we possibly can. I want to make a huge thanks to everyone who has helped us out with any donations or supported our sponsors. If you'd like to help us out, the links are in the description. Anything is greatly appreciated right now. It's very tough times for everyone, I know. But tonight, I want to welcome Tom Conwell. He has been an electronic technician with the U.S. Navy and Honeywell Inc. for 42 years, a Honeywell temperature control, fire alarm, and security specialist, biomedical engineer. He is a fire alarm level 2 certified, a meteorologist, and having an HVAC engineering resource. He has a wide-ranging expertise with keen awareness of physics, computer, and internet software, and a broad knowledge of electronics and how it intersects with the paranormal and the world of UFOs. Over the past 3 years, he has written 5 books and created a sighting map of the U.S. They are based on aspects of ufology. He has studied and researched UFO sightings reports from the entire United States and created a national sighting map, which has revealed anomalies throughout the U.S. He has also been on numerous radio programs and has published 5 books. His latest work involves a research book attempting to determine if UFOs are attracted to earthquakes. This ends in a surprising finding and has been released: Earthquakes and UFOs. Tom, welcome. How are you doing tonight?
Great, Chris. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I've been looking forward to it because there's been so much evidence in the past that UFOs have interacted with nuclear facilities, and there are hot spots around the country that have been documented over the years. And your latest work presents correlations between UFOs and earthquakes, which I find very interesting. What I'd like to start with tonight is to tell us a little bit more about your background and what got you interested in the UFO phenomenon.
Okay, well, first of all, I've always been interested in UFOs. My aunt, from when I was a little kid, was the secretary of the Astronomical Association of America. And she used to take me to various conferences and stuff. And that gave me a healthy knowledge of astronomy and gave me quite an interest in that field. So that, along with the fact that I thought that UFOs were visiting us from some other place since I was a youngster, I've always kept that feeling in the back of my head. Of course, work and life gets in the way, and I wasn't able to do a whole lot. Certainly wasn't able to do what I wanted to do. But while I was working, I just had time to work. And of course, I raised a family, and so I didn't have the time to play around like I wanted to. When I retired, that's when I had the opportunity. So I studied ufology all those years, but I wanted to look into it much, much further and seriously. So once I retired, I joined a paranormal team and also became a ufologist. And I did both at the same time for about 5 or 6 years. And then I just went into ufology and only doing that now. So it's been an interesting ride, a lot of years. And I've read an awful lot of articles along the way.
Now, when it comes to your research in ufology, have you done any field investigations yourself, or is it primarily just research you've done?
Okay, field investigations, no. Seeing that I didn't start until I retired, I didn't want to go sloshing through the woods or anything. So I limited my research into the databases, especially from the National UFO Reporting Center that had probably 75 or 80,000 sightings at the time. There's so many sightings, I figured it could take me the rest of my life just to study those. I wouldn't have time to do anything else. And that's pretty much what happened.
Now, you started out working out with a paranormal team. Did you do any paranormal investigations with them? What kind of things did you do with the paranormal investigations?
Yeah, seeing that I had a background in electronics, they used me as a resource for a lot of their things. I did notice, because I was a fan of paranormal shows on television, I did notice that there was a lot of misuse of electronics. And so I made it my goal to utilize the electronics correctly and to correct um, any misunderstandings that anybody that I came across had. So that was revealing, because a lot of the electronics is, like I said, it's been badly misused. The electronics that's used around the paranormal is adapted from use to looking at other things. And I noticed that people were utilizing the electronics incorrectly, in that they would take a particular device in their hand and wave the thing around and move it quickly. When you do that, one of the things that it shows up is you're going to get spikes on your readouts. And that's one of the things that I corrected immediately with the public investigations and things like that. So hopefully I left my mark there somewhere, and the people that were to utilize this equipment was going to do it very carefully, methodically, slowly, and they're going to get some good information then. So that's basically what I did.
Now, what prompted you to write your books? They Are Here, Volume 1 and 2.
And 3.
And 3, yes.
Well, I was looking for something to talk about. Pretty much, I love doing public talks. So I started looking into some of the abnormalities that I'm sure were going to show themselves when I look carefully at the databases, because I worked strongly with databases while I was with Honeywell. And I noticed some interesting things, and thought that I could create some pretty fun talks and tell people about some things that they may or may not have seen. And then someone asked me while I was working on my first database talk, which was out of the state of New York, someone asked me to give a speech in Pennsylvania. So I did pretty much the same thing in Pennsylvania that I had done in New York. And that's when I noticed the same kind of anomalies in Pennsylvania that I noticed in New York. Well, that got me curious. Why were there the exact same things happening in the sky in Pennsylvania as in New York? And they weren't normal. They were just very odd. So
Could you give us some examples of what types of things were occurring?
yeah. The things that we're seeing in the skies were predominantly around water features, such as the Atlantic Ocean and Lake Ontario and Lake Erie in the areas of New York. And there were tremendous amounts of sightings of what I called fireballs in this area. They were, well, for all intents and purposes, they were balls of fire, but they weren't screeching through the sky like a meteor would. They were just sort of dawdling around, moving slowly, making right-hand turns, turning upward, things that meteors would not do. And I noticed that in and around New York in 3 different locations, Western New York and near Rochester, Syracuse area, and down along the Atlantic Ocean in Long Island. And then when I started looking at Pennsylvania, I noticed down near Philadelphia that there was a large collection of sightings that were coming in off of the bay there. And also I noticed the same things in Erie, PA, which was right off of Lake Erie. So these kinds of sightings happen in bunches from 3 to 15. And they would all do the same kind of thing, make the same kind of maneuvers in the sky, and stop and then disappear. It was really, really interesting. But I saw this so many times that I really couldn't discount it. And I wondered what else was happening. And if it was related only to the ocean, only to water. Well, that sent me down the East Coast. And so once I did that and was able to write about what I was seeing and why, I thought, I set off to do the Central US, which was volume 2. And in volume 2, I was finding somewhat the same things in and around the Great Lakes, massive groups of sightings. So I thought at this point, I'm going to have to bite the bullet. I'm going to have to get a very big US map and put pins in the map and try to find out what's actually happening where, and if there are groups of sightings, and if these sightings are related to the water, related to being close to the water, and in all ways, if they are water related in any way whatsoever. And that's when I did the map for volume 2, the map of the US for volume 2. I found out that there were so many sightings in the central US that I had to cut it short on what I was actually putting pins in the map for. So I had broken all these sightings, all the 75,000 sightings down into 7 groups. And I only included 3 of the 7 groups, the largest ones. So this once I did the map of the central U.S., then I moved over back again to the eastern U.S., finished my book in the eastern U.S., and finished the map, and put all the pins in, and found that the water seemed to be the major trigger point for all of the sightings that I was seeing. Not all of them, for a lot of the sightings that I was seeing. Of course, things like areas in the mountains, power plants, not necessarily nuclear, rivers, geographical interest points. In some cases, I noticed that in areas where a couple of earthquakes occurred, I saw a couple of sightings there over the years. So that's what put it in the back of my mind that maybe this is something I'm going to have to come back to. Well, I finished book one, finished the map for the East Coast and the central U.S. Then I went on to writing book two. And as I started writing book two, I decided that I wanted to try to say why sightings were occurring. I didn't know for sure, but if they were in certain areas, I was going to try to pin that on things like pollution, air and water pollution, the pollution that comes out of power plants, because there's always sightings around power plants. So I looked at all of that stuff in volume two, then went back to volume one, rewrote that with all of the looking for all of the pollution sources. And man, this was really some undertaking. It took me several years to do one and two. And then when I went on to three, I didn't have to go back anymore. I had decided what I really wanted to do with these books, and put volume three in with pollution. But I found that as I went out to volume three and the Western US, there was a whole lot less pollution seen both in the sky, on the ground, underground, in water, lakes and rivers, except in maybe several different locations that it sent me off in another direction. Why are these things all over the place? And I couldn't put my finger on why all these sightings were just plastered all over the United States. So I finished my big US map for the Western US and started looking very closely at where there were collections of sightings, wondering if I was going to come across groups of sightings that I had never seen before, areas that weren't talked about either in anyone else's publications, and found a whole bunch of areas where there were just groups of sightings that I had never heard about before, such as in Colorado. There are groups of sightings that happen right along the foothills to the Rocky Mountains. There's 4 of them from the northern area all the way down to the southern section of Colorado. And of course, all of California was just loaded with sightings, and especially Los Angeles, that has so many sightings I couldn't even believe it. So it's been a really, really big project for me to get those first 3 books done. And what I had actually done was create a whole lot of work for myself because of the map. And because of what I was finding on the map. So it's been quite a struggle for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, now, what do you think the correlation is with the water? Do you think it's some kind of fuel or power source for these UFOs?
Not possibly. Um, a fuel power, maybe they're using the hydrogen out of the water. Um, Maybe they're using the heavy water for power source. maybe maybe they're just using the water because they come from a water planet. Maybe they are just using the water because they know that we don't really investigate under the water very much at all, and it's a convenient place to hide. So I don't know what that reason is, but I do know that they are using the water, and they have multiple locations in under the water where there are probably either collection points or bases or something like that. And those are situated all over the world.
Very interesting. Now, there's this debate amongst ufologists that's been going on for a long time: the nuts and bolts versus the type of interdimensional type of extraterrestrials or UFOs that are, there are many believe that these are strictly beings that are coming from across the galaxy or universe in these vehicles. And that there are some that believe that they're always around us at all times in this type of super spectrum, and they can pop in and out of our reality at will. I kind of personally think it's a little mix of both. What are your thoughts on that?
I actually have to agree with you. I believe it is both. I believe that we are being visited by extra dimensionals, people from a different dimension. That we are being visited by extraterrestrials, people from a different planet, who have utilized traveling through dimensions to make it here, because of the distances are just so ridiculously large. And I would not be surprised that things like um, 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 when they travel through the other dimensions and pop out wherever they pop out, here or out in space or whatever, that they are creating, I guess, for lack of a better word, a wake. And if you were to throw a big rock in the water, it creates a bubble around it, and the water sloshes up on the shore, and that becomes obvious. I believe that that kind of stuff is creating ripples within the dimensional world that is perhaps got the attention of the extra dimensionals, and has bubbled to the surface the sighting of ghosts all over the planet. So there's lots of things happening, and they're all from the fact that we are growing up, we are awakening, so to speak, and we are getting close to the point where we are going to be welcomed into the universe, and not just like sitting here on our own. So that will happen very shortly.
Now, I also want to ask you, when it comes to your thoughts on people who have been contacted. You mentioned that there's this sort of awakening recently. I find that a lot more people have either come out with their contact experiences or even experienced new paranormal or metaphysical or even UFO experiences that they haven't before, and it seems to be happening a lot more often now. Along with that, we have the talk, of course, in the mainstream media of UFOs. So there does seem to be some sort of shift happening when it comes to our consciousness and the metaphysical world, with UFOs and paranormal.
Oh, yeah. Um, that was brought to light in my writing in my most recent book, Earthquakes and UFOs. Even though that what you just described has nothing to do with earthquakes, I think it has everything to do with UFOs. Now, in that book, it may seem like I'm changing subjects on you, but I'm not. In that book, what I looked at was where the major earthquakes occurred since 2001 and put them on a US map. And at the same time, took all of the UFO sightings from the National UFO Reporting Center and put those on the maps in and around the dates and times of the occurrences of the major quakes. What I was looking for was when the groups of sightings were seen, were they seen because of the earthquakes? There were approximately 22 major earthquakes since 2001. And when I created those maps, I looked at UFO sightings versus the locations of the earthquakes. And I found virtually no no apparent evidence that the earthquakes were being attracted to, were attracting UFOs. So here I was, I had done about 9 months to a year of a work on maps and a study on earthquakes and where they occurred. And I had nothing to show for it. So, and I'm getting back to your question shortly. So what I did was I set my maps up on a big table, great big table, from beginning to end, 1 through 23 or so. And they were sitting on the table, and I was looking at them and studying them for, what am I seeing here? What is going on with the sightings, where they happen to be, and the earthquakes? So even though I noticed that there was no large collections around the earthquakes themselves, there were still collections. And I was trying to account for them. So one night, I was looking at these maps. My eyes were kind of glazing over, and my dog barked to go outside. So I left the table where I was and went to the door and slid the door open for her to get out, and waited for her to get back. And then when she did, I walked back into the kitchen that I had my table set up, and I stopped at my maps in a different place than I was sitting. I was looking at the maps down the row of the way they were being set. Now, I was looking pretty much west to east, west to east, west to east of every single map. And I noticed that there were straight lines all over the map. Why were there straight line sightings of all of these UFOs, and primarily the East Coast? Because once you get out west, the cities become a whole lot a greater distance between them. But I noticed that from pretty much the Mississippi River all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, that there were straight line sightings. And that didn't happen on 1 map or 2 maps or 5 maps. It happened on about 20 of them. I knew that something was going on here, but I didn't know what they were. So I stacked all my maps in a row, stacked a pile, put them away for about a month or two, and then brought them back out again and thought about this the whole time. And the only reason that I could come up with straight line sightings of UFOs in the United States was that they're looking for something. Now, okay, if they're looking for something, is it geographical? Well, I pretty much discounted that pretty quickly because these guys got here from trillions of miles away, and they certainly didn't have to struggle because they had supercomputers and supercomputing skills and the ability to store all of their maps once they did scans, so they wouldn't have to keep scanning across the same things over and over. They wouldn't have to do that. So why is there a necessity to scan back over the same areas in the United States over and over? What was changing? Didn't have an answer. What was changing? It wasn't the ground. The ground hasn't changed in 100 years. It wasn't the water. It wasn't pollution, because pollution can be drawn out on a graph, and you know what the pollution is going to be most likely a year, 2 years from now. So there's no reason to keep scanning the same thing for that. So what are they scanning for? The only thing that I was unable to discount was that the population was awakening. Our population is waking up. We are beginning to recognize that we are spiritual beings, and these are spiritual people. These are people with great mental skills, and they are able to tell what we're doing just by flying over top of us. Their mental skills, they're able to pick out the people who are psychic just by flying over. They are, these are the people that were targeted for abduction early on.
Now, speaking of abduction, have you found any correlation between contact cases, abduction cases, and some of these locations that you've pinpointed?
No. The abductions seem to be one from here, one from there, and they are pretty far between each other. I included a whole lot of other maps for things like missing persons and Bigfoot, and I was looking at absolutely everything that I could think of, trying to come up with reasonings for why there was straight line sightings, and I could not find a map or any revealed information for where people lived when they were abducted. That seems to be one of the things that when I did abduction interviews early on after I became a ufologist, I realized that people will be willing to tell me their story, but they didn't want it to get out. And they didn't want to really say where they were at the time. So there was going to be that kind of a problem. I was never going to find a map that has where the people were abducted. So I had to try to find it from a different viewpoint. And I think I actually stumbled on it while I was looking at earthquake maps. And again, it had nothing to do with the earthquakes, but it had everything to do with the sightings in the United States in short time periods, like 3 days or 4 days or whatever else. Because I was looking at where the UFOs were for a couple of days before and a couple of days after the major quake. And that's when I noticed the straight lines. When I expanded it out, the straight lines went away. I couldn't see them anymore because things were starting to fill in. But I did notice them early on when I had like 2 or 3 days, and it became very apparent what was going on. So yeah, they are watching us, and they are, in my opinion, ready to announce, based on our ability to ascend, to to awake, and I really think that something is coming in the very near future.
How much do you think our own government and military knows about this? And if so, do you think that they possibly have contact with some of these beings?
Okay. A government, I believe that they have a general awareness that we are being visited, but not a whole lot. I believe when you get to some sections of the military, they are a whole lot more secretive, and some sections within our government that is super secretive. They know what's going on. A little bit of the military does, not all the military, and they've pretty much kept it to themselves since the 1940s, when things started to ramp up because we lit off a couple of nuclear weapons.
So do you think that's what happened after, World War II, when we had the massive, UFO sightings and a lot of talk about that in the media, is because we were using the nuclear weapons?
That was one of them that really attracted their attention. I think they were probably been here for thousands of years, at least a contingent of them, and they kept track of us, and they probably were diddling with our DNA along the way, just to make sure that we were able to ascend in the right time frame. And when we got to the point that we were going to light off a nuclear weapon and perhaps destroy our own planet, they had probably seen that act before out in the universe, and that's when they started looking very, very closely at us, and called in huge quantities of their own people to come and monitor what we're doing. Yeah, it got pretty intense for a while, and until they realized that we probably were going to keep it under control and not blow ourselves up, that they relaxed a little bit, and now they're just watching us as people and watching us ascend.
When you look at certain ancient texts and scriptures and things like the Sumerian tablets and Egyptian mythos, it seems like that we had contact with some of these beings. We were able to communicate more on a regular basis with some of these extra dimensional or whatever they are, and it seems like that we possibly could still have the potential to have this communication. Do you think something happened along the way that changed that to where it became more of a exclusive or secretive type of communication with these beings that not everyone had access to?
Not really sure where you're going with your question there. We definitely, as a population, had contact with extraterrestrials way in the ancient past, and that's why I said that there was a contingent of them that watched us, and they watched what we did through the years. Since let's say since the 50s or 60s, when we started looking at ancient ancient creations with a little bit of a different light. I think they got interested in what we were going to uncover. And they became a whole lot more interested in what we were doing. And I think they knew at that point that they were going to uncover, that we were going to uncover secrets about them. And that has happened probably slowly at first, and it seems to be ramping up a whole lot quicker and quicker. A lot of the megalithic sites have things hidden in them that are going to reveal things that we've either lost track of tens of thousands of years, or they wanted us to find well into the future. I'm not sure which, and there may be both scenarios involved. But as we are starting to investigate those things, we are creating some pretty interesting things that we are wanting to study, and that we are studying along the way. And it should be very interesting what's going to happen in the next 10 to 15 years as we uncover some things, especially in Turkey, and maybe some things extra about the pyramids and some of the other sites in Peru. So this is all, it's all coming together. Little bits of everything are coming together, and pretty soon somebody's going to piece it all together, and it's going to be picked up by the national media, and that's when things are going to go berserk.
Now, you had mentioned briefly that there may be some factions of these beings that do experiments on humans, possibly I've heard of hybrid programs. What do you think that the interest in most of these beings are? Do you think that for most of them we are some sort of experiment, or do you think there's something more to a lot of these beings, that they may be sort of like protectors of our planet, or something more along those lines?
Okay, well, yes, I believe they are protectors. A lot of times the people that take people, they're called the Watchers. They watch over our planet and try to keep us safe, keep us from doing stupid stuff. And we also may find when or if all this stuff comes out, that they have prevented us from doing some really stupid things. But what are they doing when they're abducting us? Are they looking at our DNA? Well, yes, they are. They are constantly tweaking our DNA and trying to get us to awaken. The people that are abducted are indeed people who are psychic in almost all cases, and these people are looked at, experimented on. They are wondering what level of psychic skills that we are moving towards on our own. And I believe in some cases they're also tweaking that and helping us along a little bit. They are indeed looking at our DNA. They are indeed trying to improve their own race by mating. That might not be the right word. By utilizing human DNA and their own DNA and creating hybrids. And that's why I think that in the very near future, they're going to introduce us to them. And it's going to be a whole new race of people. And it's going to get real interesting on the earth.
Yeah, it's already getting really interesting.
Oh yeah.
For the past few years, especially since like 2017, I believe, we've had a lot of mainstream UFO coverage, a lot of talk from government officials, the Pentagon releasing information. Do you think that they know that this will be occurring and this is sort of like a preparation of sorts, or they're trying to kind of slowly introduce this into the public?
Yeah, yeah, slowly. For years and years, especially from the 40s to, well, probably the early 2000s, anyhow. If you mentioned UFO, you were a pariah. All of a sudden, you're out in either the science world um, or the um, or the mass media world. They didn't want to hear anything about it. Now that they have introduced a few things, um, like some stories that occurred in the early 2000s and 2012, some that the Navy came across. And there's always little stories or little twists on the same story that are constantly being released. This is because they know that we are getting close, and that if they do it slowly, then it won't be uh, this uh, difficulty in some of us getting used to what is actually going to be said, so that there's not going to be problems with religion or the human race having difficulty um, accepting another race. So they know that we're likely to do that. So this whole thing is happening very, very slowly, and but even
Now,
though it's happening slowly, it's increasing in speed along the way, and it's coming to a head.
yeah, I would agree. Something's definitely coming to a head.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more about your latest book when it comes to the UFO sightings and earthquakes. Are there any other correlations that you found that may lead you to believe that they are attracted to earthquakes, or being, having something to do with them?
Um, no, no. Through all of that, uh, I was able to conclude that there's not enough evidence to say that earthquakes are attracting UFOs. Um, we didn't have enough large earthquakes like 7, 8s, or 9s here in the United States, because it's the only database I had to go by. So I believe that the really big earthquakes may indeed still attract UFOs. And I've been in contact with another gentleman who's writing a book about earthquakes and UFOs, and he lives in Indonesia. And of course, you know that some of the earthquakes they've had out there have been some killers. And he thinks that there is a um, um, an attractive factor in the bigger earthquakes and UFOs. And I sent him my book so he can look at what I've been looking at, and he's coming up with some other information, and he probably won't come out with that for another year or so, about what he's found in Indonesia. That should be very, very interesting. But I would not be surprised that there are um, attractive forces in really big earthquakes and large um, volcanoes that are attracting UFOs. It's a very interesting subject, though.
It is. Now, based on some of the interviews you've done with contactees and abductees,
Mhm.
are they primarily experiencing positive experiences? Because occasionally you'll have the ones that have had terrifying experiences with gray aliens or reptilians or something like that. What is from your experience, is it primarily positive?
Okay. There were a few people who were um, terrified because they were taken. But I think that's primarily because they were taken. Um, and it was against their will. And they had to face the music and didn't want to. But once they returned to the earth and had time to put this particular event in perspective, I think that the greatest majority of them found the abduction event to be generally positive. One of the things I did when I was interviewing is I asked them, of course, a fixed set of questions, and then based on what they told me, I may have had to alter my source of questioning there a little bit. But with each particular person, I asked the same question in the very beginning: did they give you a message? Out of the 33 interviews that I did in the first several years of being a ufologist, in those interviews, I only received 10 responses. I didn't expect that. I expected everyone to tell me, yes, I got a response from them, and they told me to, fill in the blanks. I thought I was going to hear that, but I didn't. I only heard that maybe 10 out of the 33 or so actually received the message, and they all told me it was the same message, the exact same message. There wasn't a mix of messages. It was all the same messages. And that message was, take care of your planet. Just one message. I could not get that out of my mind, that was the message that I was going to receive. And I just found that so fascinating that I've always kept that in the back of my mind and used that a particular data on a slide in most of my talks. It got me to thinking that maybe I should write about that. And that happens to be my next book, Take Care of Your Planet. And I'm going to be looking at the things that we're doing to our planet, and that taking care of it means to be careful with how we're polluting it, and what changes we've already made to it, and is there global warming, and how that affects what is going to happen to our planet in the future. So that's pretty much that story. But I didn't expect to write about that. But like I said, I couldn't get that thought out of my mind. Take care of your planet. It's like they wanted us to know that. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing from a lot of contactees as well. And with everything going on, since 2020 started with the pandemic, everybody's, the lockdown, a lot of anxiety, fear, people losing their jobs. Do you think that during these times we're going to see a little bit more of an uptick in contact and UFO sightings?
There has been. I was talking to a friend who's compiling data on all of the sightings, and there has been a major uptick this year, and also in the past couple of years, but especially this year. And a lot of the reason behind that is that more and more people are home, and there's just more time to waste time and go sit outside and have a smoke and look up at the sky and things like that. And I think that's the major reason for the uptick, maybe. the major reason may also be that there's just more things in the sky. I don't know for sure, but it seems like because more people are home, that's probably the reason, but I could easily be wrong.
Yeah, we're definitely living in fascinating times. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Tom, I want to thank you again so much for coming on tonight. Before you head out, if people are interested in finding your books, more about your work, any websites, social media, stuff like that, just let them know where they can find you.
Sure. Okay. I'm predominantly have a location on Facebook, and all of my postings are done public. So even if you're my friend or not my friend, you can come visit my page. The Facebook address is Tom.Conwell, CONWELL .3. If you look on Facebook, you'll see me instantly. And I try to post maybe 4 or 5 postings a week about UFOs and about what I've noticed in studying UFOs. And if you want my books, you can contact me that way through an instant message on Facebook. You can follow me, and then you can send me a message on Messenger, or you can go with my email address, and that is TCONWEL2 at nycap.rr.com. That's tconwell2 at nycap.rr.com. And I accept all kinds of payment methods for my books, and I usually send them out once I receive an order.
All right, very good. Thank you again, Tom, for coming on tonight. Fascinating information. And of course, you're going to be working on some more stuff, so I'd love to have you back on in the future.
Absolutely. I'd love to, Chris.
All right. Well, you have an excellent night, and until next time, everyone else, you have an excellent evening as well.